Hello and welcome back to She's in Focus, the podcast dedicated to inspiring and empowering female filmmakers and video creators from all walks of life and on every step of their creative journey. I'm your host, Kel Grant, an aspiring filmmaker from New Jersey who's just trying to turn my passion into something more and connect with amazing women who have the same passion for video. One of those being Makayla Wheeler, an almost 23-year-old filmmaker located in Florida, capturing the beauty of those ocean communities. I found Makayla on Instagram and was just blown away by her work. She does a little bit of everything, works with nonprofits, businesses, captures wedding films, works on documentaries. She has a wide range of video work and skills, so I'm so excited to hear her story today. Makayla, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This is my first podcast, so I'm really excited to just be able to share my story and hopefully be an encouragement to other ladies in the industry and just people in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny. I think your location kind of lends itself to beautiful storytelling and imagery because how do you live in Florida and be surrounded by the, majesty of the ocean and ocean communities and not be in the visual arts space?
Yeah, for sure. Florida, I feel like you have to love the ocean to live in Florida. And or you just have to love water because we have so much water. We have, the ocean, we have lakes, we have the Florida Springs. So I love water, and I've grown to love the ocean more and more as I've lived in Florida. And it's just we can get out year round and create beautiful outdoor content, which is something that I personally love is being out in the outdoors, and that's where I feel like I do my best work. So
yeah, and I have seen your work. It's incredible. Do you think that your atmosphere inspired you to get started in filmmaking, or what was that journey like?
Yeah, so my journey started actually around probably 12 or 13. I kind of went through that phase like all young girls, I feel like, do, where I was like, I want to be an actress.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was also riding horses, which is another thing that a lot of young girls love to do. And so at that time, I was dabbling in some commercials and acting lessons. And then I was also riding horses, and we would take these little iPod Nanos out and on the trail rides that we would take our horses out on the trails and just run around. And I would we had these little Gorilla Pod tripod things that we would mount the iPod to and hang them from trees and then run past and all this stuff. And then I would Chronicles of Narnia is my favorite movie that inspired my life. I loved watching behind the scenes and stuff. So I would take those little adventure sequences and then I would put them together, and put Chronicles of Narnia music and make these little corny adventure horse chase sequences. So yeah, that's how it started for me. And then what ended up happening as a result of being in front of the camera is I met a director-producer out of Orlando through a contact and through working. And I quickly kind of realized that I wanted to be behind the camera because you have more control. And as an actress, I don't know. I just was really picky about the projects that I wanted to do and to be a part of. And so I ended up, my mom actually, because I was homeschooled, and my mom always just really heavily invested into my interests, which was really amazing. So she ended up reaching out to this director producer in Orlando, and just cold called and asked him if he would be willing to mentor me. And he ended up just giving me he was amazing, Randy Baker. I'm sure it's fine that I mentioned his name. He ended up giving me he would just come over and give me tons and tons of gear. And
wow.
Yeah, just so overly generous, and really just taught me like everything I knew at like a really young age, and it was just like it was amazing. So that's kind of what opened the door to the video stuff.
Yeah, and you do a little bit of everything. Was there one specific style of filmmaking that you started with?
Yeah, I feel like my style has really grown and evolved. I feel like when I first started, it was more like maybe like TV type GoPro-ish look, you know, kind of, with not a lot of depth of field. And then because that's kind of what initially I was trained in. And then I actually went away to this summer camp when I was 17 years old and worked on their like AV team. So we would have to take like photos and videos of like the campers and all this other stuff. And from there, I kind of developed more of a cinematography of like shallow depth of field and kind of more of a cinematic style. I kind of found my own style, which is kind of just like evolved over time, I feel like. As a result of, they kind of wanted me to not have such a, like they wanted shallow depth of field and stuff. So my style kind of changed when I went away to camp and then was just shooting every day. Like I just got so much better because we were just shooting a ton of content every day. So
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of hands-on experience at kind of a young age to kind of set that foundation.
yeah.
I went to college for video production, and even with taking classes, like if you really wanted to enhance your skills, you had to get out and work outside of the classes and find these opportunities. I think that it was really awesome that, your mom reached out to to Randy, right? Randy's his name? And made that connection. So you gained these skills that kind of helped lay the groundwork for you being able to put yourself out there and work at this summer camp and gain more skills. And I'm sure that because I'm 24, and even my confidence with my filmmaking skills isn't where it should be, where it needs to be. How did you have a level of confidence when you were younger getting started in this because you were mentored by certain people, or what was that experience like for you?
Well, it's funny because my film mentor, when I first met him, he was just like, because we have like Full Sail down here, which is like a big film school. And it's funny, he's kind of against like film schools. He's like, didn't really like film schools and was like, one of his big things was like, if you want to make films, go make films, right?
Yeah.
Now, actually, he's kind of come back around and is a full-time professor at Full Sail, which is kind of funny how it all works. But that was really his encouragement to me, was like, if you want to direct, go direct. If you want to make films, go make films. And so I think like the thing that was like so amazing is like he kind of gave me all of the tools that maybe you would get at a film school. But he just gave me the tools because he had all the gear and kind of taught me like what you do and what not to do technically. And then was just like, go out and make films, go out and, shoot whatever your passion is. And so I just kind of started doing that because it was a passion of mine. And I loved shooting like adventure-y type stuff, So that was kind of his mantra for me, and I think that it was a good one because I just feel like the more you shoot, the better that you get,
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
So, did you at first, like when you were gaining all of these skills? Because I'm trying to think, like if you were 17 at the time. Around that age?
Yeah, I'd say I started at 14, and then it was really like a passion of mine, like from then on, like that I did. It was just like what I lived for, kind of.
Got it. Because I'm thinking like if I'm a business owner and a teenager comes up to me and says, like, oh, I'm into video and I want to like make a video for your business. I don't know how seriously I'm taking that at first. With that, especially because if you're young, typically, if you're on the younger end, you don't have this huge portfolio of work. And if you do, it might not be to the level that, someone who's hiring commercially might want. So how did you build this reel and like approach? Did you approach businesses to get more work and build up your portfolio?
Yeah, honestly, that was a real struggle for me because my mom and my dad were both super supportive of my interests. And so we opened up actually an LLC, MGW Productions, when I forget how old, but it was before I was 18, to really try and make, money and be able to do, projects for businesses and stuff. But it's definitely, and I mean, to some extent, it's gotten better, but it still can be a little bit of a struggle where you approach people and like, they don't take you seriously, like businesses and stuff. They would be like, well, how old are you? I mean, I still get asked that, obviously, and so at first, like when I was really young, it was like upsetting to me because you do sometimes get that you'll get that reaction, people just don't take you seriously or whatever. But
Right.
I just still kind of continued to do passion projects. And, eventually it was actually, I transitioned over full time about 3 years ago when I was 20. And the door for me to do that was actually through my church. That has really supported me in the arts, and they just support the arts in general. They're very creative, and so they offered me to be on like a retainer position, and so that really kind of helped like as a baseline of having that. And then what I could do is then build my business with other projects and things, to then kind of freelance or just do projects for various different people. So that was kind of the evolution of that. And then, eventually now I'm kind of on like contract with like on just like project by project basis with them. And I've built up to the point now where like people just contact me and it's like a steady stream kind of.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But it was a struggle in the beginning a little bit,
Absolutely. Yeah. And you do a lot of different services, it sounds like. You work with, nonprofits, you do wedding filmmaking too, documentary style filmmaking. Is there something that, weaves it all together and determines what projects you take or what stories you like to tell? Or are you just kind of trying to gain as many skills and build your portfolio in all these different areas? Is there one you prefer over the other?
Yeah. So I feel like right around when I was 19, I was really just like kind of trying to figure out like it was kind of hard. Like I didn't know, whether I was going to go the college route like everyone was telling me. I didn't know what, my passions were outside of filmmaking. But kind of as a result of kind of just, I read this book, What Color Is Your Parachute, which is kind of like a job seeking book.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of honing in on like different interest areas and then putting all those together. And I think for me, 3 of those are number 1, creativity, filmmaking, obviously. Number 2 is just adventure and the outdoors. And number 3 is stories that serve others, stories that have a purpose, and stories that just inspire people or serve people or make a difference. And so basically I took that kind of those 3 prongs and then kind of integrated that into, okay, I want to have a film business, but these are kind of the stories I want to tell. I don't want to necessarily just do corporate videos, So I think as far as, we were talking about the balance of, how do I know which projects to take or not?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a give and take. And I feel like a lot of filmmakers get stuck on one of the extremes where they're like, well, I don't want to do weddings and I don't want to do corporate stuff. So, I just want to do passion projects or, work I'm passionate about, but I'm not going to be able to make a living. So I'm just going to get like a regular job kind of, and they get like very rigid in that mindset of like, well, I don't want to do this. And then there's other people on the other extreme that are like, it's just all about the money for them. And you know what I mean? Like they're just like crank out the weddings or, whatever it might be. And they just completely lose their passion and everything else, for their craft. And for me, it's been like a really kind of a careful balancing act, of kind of trying to play both sides of the fence a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I think that I fall into like a unique category with filmmaking because I do have a full-time job, but I like having that stability. Because I think if I went like going all in with video production and filmmaking, it's awesome because you get to, most of the time work on projects that you really like, but it's also, that is your livelihood. That is your, that is the way you need to make a living. You have to rely on steady work. You have to rely on happy clients, keeping your level of production at this all-time high, to continue producing the quality that your contents or your clients deserve.
Yeah.
And then for me, I think that was a little bit too much pressure. I wanted the flexibility of being able to kind of pick and choose what projects and then be able to kind of find my voice in film, because I'm really just started. I've been doing video production for years because I went to I did a program in high school with it, and then I went to college for that. But I'm still trying to find like my voice, I guess, and also the skills that I learned in high school, weren't really setting me up for success in what is now the real like video production world. So I ended up kind of having to find, new avenues of learning and doing different programs and things like this to enhance my skills. But I think I'm in a unique position, and I get to really pick the projects that I want to work on because I don't need to have that, financial, support from those projects. I can kind of, tailor my journey to, working full time in this career and then getting to kind of dictate what projects I get to work on. Yeah. So how does you work? So you have a few different styles of filmmaking, you work on different projects. How does your creative process differ with those? Or do you look at them the same way? Because even that promo that I watched for that, the jewelry making company, it was so cinematic that I felt like I was watching a documentary. Do you think like each like style of cinema informs the other?
I would say I have I kind of have a unique style that I think is in every video that I do. And that is I may not be the greatest cinematographer or whatever, but I would say like my strength and my passion is being able to create emotion and evoke a response out of the audience based upon my work. That is super important to me. And I mean, that's why I watch, videos, and that's like my passion, is being able to capture and tell emotion in order to evoke emotion in my final product. And so I think that doesn't really change with any project that I do. But the needs and maybe the flavor is a little different for each client, that I have. Right. So I would say like my style is still the same, but sometimes I'm gonna like be a little bit more like I would say a big part of my creative process is watching other people's work and picking and choosing different things, whether it be like cinematography, like a shot, or the way that they tell a story. I love like taking bits and parts from other people's work and then using that towards a specific project. So that's often, if I'm working with, a specific client that I know is, more athletic and more fast-paced, then I'm going to go watch work that is more fast-paced and athletic and like boom, 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 boom. And then I'm going to try and incorporate those elements within my style into that video. So there's a little bit of, you know, experimentation and you know, expression within that. But I would say all of my work still reflects like the same style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what I'm hearing from you is that you're constantly like learning and honing that style as well. I think I never really thought about this, but like, intake is a big part of it too, like watching others work and thinking about that. So what is it that you because all of your work that I've seen kind of gives me the documentary style vibe, in that it you're right, it comes down to storytelling and being able to tell a really good story. So what do you like about, you know, documentary style? For one, I think it requires a lot more self-promotion on your end, because, you know, than say commercial work that you do for a client. And I feel in a lot of ways that it's a bit more personal and that you have a greater responsibility. You know, you're often sharing others' stories and voices. You know, what challenges you with documentary filmmaking?
Well, I just like that, number one, you get to meet like amazing people, and you get to tell their story in a way that like ends up making them cry. And that like always is really special to me. You know, if I've done my job well, then you want them to just be like in tears, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know? And so that's kind of my honor as a filmmaker, is getting to tell people's stories and their journeys. And that's really like just brings me the biggest joy, as opposed to just cranking out like corporate stuff or, you know, whatever it might be. Because I think, you know, stories and the combination of the visuals and the music and the, you know, narrative, like, you know, can touch people in a way. Like stories touch people, and they can change the way people think in a way that, you know, is really amazing. And I think when that's harnessed for good, you know, that's a really great thing. So that's like my passion. I just feel honored and humbled to get to tell, you know, what people have been through or what their passions are. So I would say that's the thing that attracts me the most about, you know, the more cinematic documentary style, as opposed to like corporate stuff, or even just like making narrative films, like making up, you know. I used to be like, oh, I want to direct movies, and I love movies, you know. I think movies are amazing, and I love watching movies. But I think at the end of the day, like as I've grown, I'm like, I don't want to like make up stories per se. Like I want to tell real people's stories that really, I mean, and I'm not saying like filmmaking, like making movies is bad. I think it like that's amazing. Like I love movies, but I just think for me, as I grew up, I was kind of like, man, I want to, you know, tell people's stories that really lived, because I think there's some amazing ones out there. At least that's where I'm at in my journey right now. That might switch around, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting to me because you started relatively young, taking on this big task of telling other people's stories. And I think that, you know, documentary style filmmaking is something that's always interested me, but I've always been so afraid because it's like you are in charge of this person's narrative and casting them in the best light. Like what are some things, did you just kind of improve your documentary filmmaking style over time, just kind of threw yourself into it and kept creating documentaries? Like what advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into like the documentary filmmaking space, but has a little bit of apprehension due to the level of like responsibility that's in it?
That's a good question. I mean, I haven't given it a lot of thought.
Right.
I would say to be a filmmaker, you have to be a really good observer. And I think that's something that like I've learned over the years in just doing so many different, you know, events, or you have to be really good at observation. and you have to be a really good listener. So I think for me, with my clients or with people that I'm telling their stories, it's getting to know them on all different levels and really listening to them, and then taking that and putting it back into the work. Taking all those, because what'll end up happening when you interview people is they're giving you their story, you know? So it's taking all those little pieces and then putting it into something that's true to them. And so I think, you know, as long as you're humble and you're really listening to them and you're honoring their story, that's kind of the place to start from. You know, in terms of taking on that task, like you said, that can be very humbling, of telling someone's story, you know, authentically. I think it starts with learning how to observe and listen, and then put that back out into the work. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. I love that. And that's the thing, like sometimes as filmmakers, we think about the skills that are technical. You know, we think about
Yes.
the cinematography of it. But in order to be a good, you know, documentary filmmaker, you do need those kind of listening skills and the observation and the ability to you take that input, somebody's story, and be able to craft it and be true to their story in a cinematic way.
Yes.
And I think that you do an awesome job of that. I was so thrilled to watch Wonder of the Blue.
Well, thank you.
I think that, of course, I think that documentaries are like the most beautiful combination of weaving together a strong story with like beautiful imagery. And I think
Yes.
it gives you the time to bring stories to life by hearing from people. But, you know, like I said, it's something that's always intimidated me. So let's talk about Wonder of the Blue for a second. It's a documentary that explores like the human-ocean connection. What was that experience like for you? Because that wasn't your first documentary. Right.
No, so that actually, like I said, I worked at two, it was crazy because I worked at 2 summers up in Maryland at a big Christian youth camp ranch doing video stuff. And I just loved it up there. I didn't want to come back home to Florida, actually. And so I went through this phase. I don't like Florida. I'm a, you know, forest girl. I don't know. Whatever. But I always had a love for water from a young age, and a love for, I mean, our ocean here right on the Space Coast is not super beautiful. It's kind of like cloudy, but if you go about 2 hours south, it's beautiful, like, because the Gulf Stream literally like runs right by the peninsula of Florida. And so as I was kind of like, you know, just trying to figure out like where I was going to land, this is all like right after I graduated high school, I just started thinking like, why is it that like people love water so much and the ocean? And I was out of that question that then I began researching that, and found that this PhD guy, Wallace J. Nichols, had written a book on why, like, on his research on why people love the ocean so much. And I just was like, I really want to kind of tell this story. And I think too, it was, for me, I was like, I feel like I do my best work out in nature, but specifically the ocean. Like, you know, the beautiful clear water. Like, why is the ocean so inspiring to people, you know, whether it's musicians or, you know, artists, or, you know, there's a lot of different people that draw inspiration from the ocean, you know, athletes. So that's kind of was the concept and the question for Wonder of the Blue, kind of based on that particular book, which was called Blue Mind, written by Wallace J. Nichols.
Very awesome. Yeah, I watched it, and it's such a skill to be able to take like 4 or 5 different stories and weave them all together from different people and weave them all together into one storyline. I
was like, I could have done better, but I was a couple years ago.
So let's talk about that for a second. Like, I think that there's something to be said. So I think documentary filmmaking is a little bit different than other types of filmmaking in that if you see a commercial for a product, and then, you know, it's your first commercial, like maybe it's not that good, you can always just go back and redo that commercial, no sweat. With documentary filmmaking, it's like those stories are out there, and to kind of take that down and redo it, if you will, is kind of disrespectful to the people that took the time to help craft it and the stories that you're telling. You know, if you can't, with documentary filmmaking, I feel like you can't always go back in and say, well, I didn't like the way that I did this, so I'm gonna redo it and kind of change that. So how do you kind of how do you deal with that, the mentality of, you know, letting your work live as it is, and knowing that, okay, maybe next time I'll do something different, but kind of leaving your work out there, flaws and all, for people to see?
Well, I think it starts with really doing the best that you can. And that really starts with doing your due diligence, as my filmmaker likes to call it, or my mentor, and pre-production. And, you know, going in, when you start to interview people, it's knowing why you're interviewing them and knowing what you want them to say before they say it, kind of, you know, but also allowing for spontaneity, you know, during the filmmaking process and the interview process. So that's just a huge thing. And I sometimes struggle with pre-production because I get kind of inspired in the moment. Like, I get in the zone and I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
I get all these creative ideas. But if I'm not, you know, there, it's really hard for me to like kind of come up with those creative ideas. So, but I've learned over the years that it really starts with having good pre-production and not wasting people's time. You know, knowing how they're going to fit into the larger story and what you want them to say. And then from there, you know, it's just a process of, you know, not being so many artists I know are just crippled by perfectionism, you know, like they just hate their work. Yeah. And I'm like, that's so sad, because you're crippling yourself from like being able to really enjoy the process of being creative and creating beautiful pieces of work. And so I think not being a perfectionist and allowing for growth through your projects is very helpful when doing documentaries, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you're saying, like, trusting the process too,
Yeah.
and just like embracing the process. There are, I feel like for years, you know, I would be really hesitant to put any work up on my profiles or keep it up there for long, because I was like, oh, once I do something better, I can just replace it with the new video that I did. But I think documenting your process too is a really special thing about filmmaking, especially, you know, being a woman in the film space. Watching other women evolve as filmmakers is something that is truly inspiring to me. You know, seeing where someone was, how they evolved, and how they're, you know, they can still draw from the work that they once produced while still in you know, elevating their skills in every level in this next video that they're doing. So how do you see your business evolving? Where would you like to be 5 years from now on your filmmaking journey?
I would say, you know, I've had to do a mix of passion projects and, you know, projects that I didn't necessarily, you know, want to keep going that direction, but I did them, you know, just to pay the bills. But I've always been like super choosy about the projects that I do, because there's kind of like a effect of like, once you do one project, it leads to the next project that leads to the next project, right? So like that's part of the strategy, I think, in balancing like passion versus business versus like, you know, paying the bills and doing work projects, is knowing like where the next project's going to lead. And so for me, with my passion projects, I've really tried to keep those up, because those are an avenue of, you know, getting where I want to get to. And so a lot of those passion projects have been more documentary style stuff around the ocean and just telling people stories. And so currently I have the opportunity, as a result of meeting a connection at Surf Expo, I'm working with this nonprofit called Piper's Angels. They're out of West Palm Beach, and they help people with cystic fibrosis, which is a lung disease. And one of the ways that they fundraise, their biggest fundraiser, is a paddleboard race from Bimini, Bahamas to West Palm. So it's about 80 miles.
Wow.
So they have this big endurance event, right? And people fundraise and they train and they do this event. And so this year they want to do a documentary on a guy who has had cystic fibrosis. He ended up undergoing a double lung transplant. And that was 20 years ago, which is crazy because oftentimes with double lung transplants, the prognosis isn't always great. You can end up just not making it right there, or 5-10 years down the road, that's about it. So this guy, Scott, is actually going to be racing in this event. Wow. And we are telling his story, kind of. And so basically, this is like a dream come true project for me, to be able to tell like someone's story, like around the ocean, and just someone's amazing life story, kind of, you know, with purpose to inspire others. So all that to say, those are the kind of stories that I want to do going forward. And I don't know exactly like where this will lead, or, you know, my 5 or 10 year goal. But I would say doing more of those types of stories is definitely something that like is kind of my goal in the future. And I think too, also just being able to use my business as a way to give back, like being able to have a profitable business so that financially you can give back and serve others in that way as well. Not necessarily, you know, maybe through the work, but through financially, like being able to impact others in ways. So those would be my 2 ideas for my business.
That's awesome. And I think it's always so great for me to see examples of businesses that have like a mission and a purpose behind it too, that it's not just about paying the bills or making some cool edit for, you know, Instagram. And I think that's where I'm trying to find my voice in my own filmmaking journey. Yeah. Because, you know, it's not only about gaining the skills that you need to elevate your projects and your films, but it's also like you're saying, like, what stories do you want to tell? What do you do you want your body of work to kind of represent? Do you want to serve people, or do you want to kind of create cool content that'll get Instagram likes? Yeah. You know what I mean? I think there's a million options in between. Exactly. But I think I'm trying to still find that for myself. I have to ask, where did you get like the courage to tell somebody else's story? Because I think that's like with documentary filmmaking, that's what it's all about. You're kind of taking yourself out of it in a way, and illuminating this person or thing that you're trying to feature, and you have a lot of responsibility with that. Like I can't even imagine venturing into that space because of the sheer amount of pressure that it takes. And a lot of times with documentary filmmaking, you only have one shot to film something and get it right. Like with this the paddleboard race from the Bahamas to West Palm Beach. If your camera dies up there, you know, if you miss a shot, like you miss it for good. So I think documentary filmmaking lends itself to a lot of like fears that I have, because you not only have to rely on yourself to be able to, you know, keep everything in order. And it sounds like you're kind of a one-woman band when it comes to your documentary filmmaking. Like you are doing pre-production, production, post-production. So I know that was a lot to unpack there. Yeah. But yeah, what are kind of your thoughts?
Well, as far as this particular project, this is kind of new for me because I am kind of building out like a very, very small team. so we don't miss those moments. So it's not going to be just me like, oh, well, if I get seasick, like something, happens.
Yeah.
We're definitely, there's a practical side of putting in those safeguards and those like logistical, just being wise logistically. But I think as far as telling someone else's story, for me, like, it's been a process of being humble, because I start out in front of the camera and wanted to be the center. I do have kind of a performer in me of like, woo woo. But I think that's been just like, honestly, a maturing process on my part of starting to realize like, I feel like my true purpose and my true gifting is to be able to tell other people's stories. And that starts out of a place of really just being humble, I think. And that's kind of the birthplace of then being able to listen to other people's stories. And like I said, it goes back to observation and I think too collaboration. So, with this particular project, I'm working with like other people and having different input. So it's not, I think it also goes back to having a team. So it's not all just like on your shoulders, but being able to talk through things and have other people on the phone as you're talking to the person that you're going to tell their story, and really kind of having that collaborative space is another safeguard, for telling someone's story and getting it right and understanding, okay, what are the main beats that we need to hit here in the story?
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny because I went to school for video production, so I've done a lot of like film analysis. So all of those points make sense to me, but I think it does take a certain level of courage to put yourself behind the camera and illuminate somebody else's story. Because I think for some reason for a lot of us, when we were first introduced to cameras, we're like, well, this is great. I'll be on camera. I'll be the center of attention. I'll be in front. But you don't really realize the power of taking a step behind the camera and being able to control what the lens sees and telling stories. And I think, like you were saying, it's kind of part of a maturing process. So that's really awesome. So how important is like process for you? So I've worked on documentaries before and we had a large crew. Are you mostly a one-woman show when it comes to like cultivating your ideas and coming up with like the idea and then hiring out a crew for like the project you were just speaking of, hiring out a crew for those specific parts? Like what is your process like?
Well, I will say one thing real quick. I just thought of one other thing for your past question of being like, well, it's super intimidating to tell someone's story. And I think one thing I thought of too is like starting small. Like I did not just wake up one day and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to tell this big story. Like it was a process of really thinking it through and, feeling the weight of like, I get to tell this guy's story, this amazing story. And I don't think that I would have had the confidence to even step out had I not done all these other projects, and so I think like it's kind of like taking things in bite-sized chunks. So if you want to start, if anyone wants to start into documentary filmmaking, then start small. Start with your friends. Start with someone you admire. That's what I did. Like I would just like, I've reached out to people on Instagram of like, hey, I really love what you do. Whether it be that was the jewelry one.
Yeah.
I loved her jewelry. I wore her jewelry and I was like, man, I'd love to tell your story, And it's just starting small like that, and then growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that gives you the confidence, So I just wanted to backtrack on that one because it was something else that I thought of. But as far as the process stuff, I would say this particular project that we're doing, I think it's going to be called Double or Nothing, is really a growth process for me because I do tend to kind of just be a one-woman show when I'm doing my really any project. For weddings, sometimes my mom will assist me or a friend or something. But thus far, I haven't really had to hire out a team or something like that. But for this particular project, I'm doing production calls with the founder of the nonprofit, and then we're hiring out like some other shooters and just consulting with different people. And I think it is a real growth process for me, and something beautiful, because I think like you can really synthesize ideas in collaboration. And so I've already seen that happen on this project. And so I think that's like a thing that I'm just growing in myself, because like I'm used to being like, oh, I can do it all myself, and not, but I think when you find the right people everyone's kind of, workshopping it together, you get a much better project than if you're just trying to do it alone, So that's kind of my process. And it's really something that I'm just growing in like now,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's something that's going to continue to evolve as you grow as a filmmaker.
Yeah,
for sure. I feel like I'm in a unique position in that I'm just starting out, even though I'm 24 years old, and I studied video production in college for 5 years, because during my master's program, I also studied, filmmaking. And yet I still feel like I'm just starting after all of that, because that laid like a basic foundation. But all of those other things, like figuring out what stories you want to tell, and, kind of like you were saying, letting go of like, I have to do it all myself, like letting that, and opening the gates for others to join in on collaboration, and kind of harnessing the power of what that means. I feel like I haven't unleashed that yet. So I'm still early on in my journey. So it's really exciting to hear how kind of how you've evolved, and how, what my journey may look like. I think I'm in kind of a unique position because like I was mentioning before, like I do work a full-time job, and so I'm trying to determine the kinds of projects that I want to spend my free time on, while still, trying to make a profit with this filmmaking side business. But also, I think something you touched on was like thinking about the stories that you want to tell. Because at the end of the day, I can be like, oh, like I made a cool sneaker ad for this one company.
Yeah.
Or you could say, I told the story of this woman who owns a small jewelry business.
Yeah.
Or I told the story of this man who had cystic fibrosis. I think there's value in both sides of those. But I think, for me, on my filmmaking journey, I've been looking for purpose. Yeah. And I think, finding different stories to tell is where you find that purpose. Did you was that your experience? Do you kind of find purpose through sharing the stories of others?
Yeah, and I think that's something that every filmmaker really, is a journey that every filmmaker has to go through, is like, I think when you first get into film stuff or video stuff, and you're running your own company, and you're like, woohoo, I make, cool videos, and then after a while, sometimes that can get kind of old, you're like, okay, well, what now? And I think, for me, the real purpose has been in that, I strive to make my work, meaningful and in service for other people, telling stories that really matter. So I would definitely say like that is, where I've kind of found the most fulfillment creatively, is in kind of being able to kind of change the world for good, hopefully, through my stories, or the videos that I make.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the balance between, I guess, those types of videos and videos you have to make to pay the bills. Yep. That work balance of between those two styles. Did you always have a good balance of this when you were first starting out, or do you find in certain seasons of your business you have to work on projects that, are strictly to get some money out of, or, do you find seasons where you're just taking on kind of passion projects and that's working for you too?
I would say you know, my video business, video stuff started out for me as a passion. So I didn't really do it for money. And then it kind of became more and more, you know, I would get paid for stuff or whatever. And so, you know, when that started happening, I really had to start evaluating, like, okay, how do I balance this? And it's been like a constant, hasn't just been like, oh, I figured it all out. It's been like, you know, I go through phases where like I don't feel super inspired, or I feel kind of like bored or whatever. And sometimes I get like anxious and like, am I losing my passion, you know? But
Yeah.
I think creativity comes in waves. And so I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying in terms of like, there's definitely projects that come my way like that. Do I necessarily want to be shooting funerals for the rest of my life? No. But like if something like someone calls me and they're like, hey, can you do this? And it's just handed to me and like, you know, I need to pay the bills. Am I going to do it? Yeah. And I'm going to try to do my best. But I think, so there's projects like that. And then there's kind of projects that are kind of neutral. And then there's projects that are kind of more like geared towards exactly what I want to do. And so like, I think it's been good. You know, I'm single and like, I don't necessarily have to make like a ton of money to live, which has been really great and has helped me just to like be able to take it slower, you know, and not have to just like take every project that comes my way. So that's like been super helpful. But I think it gets back to just like, you know, kind of knowing like where one project is going to lead to the next. And that's where like you have to kind of have discernment because, you know, if you do one really good project, then you're going to get hired for another. And that you got to kind of use that to your advantage. So if you don't really want to do more projects like that, then don't put it out there on your Instagram. Don't, you know.
Yeah.
But if you do, you know, like with the passion projects, a lot of those projects I didn't get paid for, but I promoted them, which then led to paid work, you know? So you kind of, that's where the strategy comes in.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that, yeah, I don't think I've ever really considered the strategy part of it. I thought, you know, if I'm a filmmaker, I make all this work and I put everything out there. But you're right. It does take a level of strategy because if you are promoting work that you don't want to recreate again, then you're kind of giving your audience the wrong impression. But that's really interesting, and I think that it's really awesome that it seems to me like you found this balance between telling stories that you want to tell while also, you know, taking care of what you have to take care of and making films that pay the bills. What is your ultimate goal? Would you want to just strictly make, you know, like passion projects or on a specific subject?
I definitely want to tell, I would say, stories that incorporate kind of the purpose, the outdoors, and purpose and outdoors kind of. And obviously it would be a filmmaking project. That's kind of like my end goal. So like, you know, projects that center around like endurance events or different things. Those are the kind of stories that really get me fired up. So, you know, we'll see where it goes, like with this particular project, you know, like one step to another kind of, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to see where this next project takes you. So how can, you know, viewers and listeners of this podcast find you, and how can they support you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, so my website is mgwpro.com, and then my Instagram is just at mgwpro, and I have a Facebook page, MGW Productions, but that's not really like where I hang out. Instagram's my jam. So, and then I have MGW Pro Weddings, which is like my wedding one, but I'm mainly on the Instagram one. So
Great. So we know where to find you and where to look
Yeah.
out for your next project. So
Yeah.
do you have any other female creators that you look up to, or is there anyone that we should be looking out for? Who should I be hunting down next to share their story to the community on this podcast?
Well, there is a girl, Talia. She actually, I met her through this organization, the nonprofit in West Palm. She was doing the stuff before I took on this documentary. She kind of wanted to move on to some different stuff, but I think she would be a really good one to interview. Her production company is Tallymark Productions. Her name is Talia Shizano. She's really sweet. She's another like young filmmaker down in West Palm. I'm trying to think who else.
Well, even just one is perfect, because with this podcast, I really want to also kind of encourage the community aspect of it, because I think for me personally, the reason why I even started this podcast is because what inspires me most is seeing other female filmmakers accomplish the things that I want to also accomplish. So even just, and I know that for me, when I was first looking for inspiration, I was finding a lot of like awesome male creators online, but I was like, there's no one that looks like me, or there's no one that I can really identify with. So even just Talia's name is perfect. I will definitely check out her work and see if we can tell her story.
Taylor Sullivan might be another one. She's like another filmmaker. I don't know if you've seen her. Taylor Sullivan. I think she lives in California.
All right.
So yeah, those are the two that come to mind.
Awesome. All right. Makayla, thank you so much for sharing your story. I can't wait to see your new project come to life. I'll absolutely help promote it, and we'll have to have you back on to tell us about your experience with that for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored, and I hope that I answered all the questions. They were helpful.
No. This is perfect. So as usual, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.